everyone. Welcome to More Than A Muse podcast. My name is Sadie.
I'm Stauney, and this is our last week building up before the Life of a Showgirl release.
This Friday.
I know, so exciting. We obviously have to cover today the life and history of Showgirls themselves.
I am really excited to dive into this. We were texting about this before. It was actually kind of tricky, like finding sources on this and like really being able to dive into it. I was surprised that this wasn't like a more researched topic beforehand and that it was so difficult to find things. Usually there's just like an abundance of sources, even with the topics we cover. It was really fun though to dive into it. And I'm obviously very excited to talk about it. And it feels just like the perfect episode to end our Showgirl September month in preparation for this new album. I know we both have tickets to the movie, the celebration party. Very excited.
Hopefully is more than just some lyric videos. Everyone cross your fingers.
I think it will be. I'm optimistic.
So.
And we'll get to see the music video. I don't know if you saw Taylor Nation posted the itinerary for the weekend where the episode doesn't even come out on YouTube and the lyric videos don't come out on YouTube until after it's out of theaters. So you have to go into theater in order to see it. So it's not just available on YouTube, which I think is okay. That makes it feel at least a little bit more special.
Yeah.
When, it's not like you could just watch it on YouTube right before you go in and now you get to see it on the big screen. That is your chance to see it. It's on the big screen.
That'll be a lot better.
Before we dive into the episode and like speaking of spectacles and showgirls, I went to the Addison Rae concert in Nashville last weekend. I have to say, it was a great show. It was a fun show. I am an Addison Rae truther. I think that girl is a superstar. I think she has such legit artistic vision, and I think she is here to stay. So I am just excited to see. I'm just excited to see me be correct, to be honest, years to come and just be like, yeah, I knew that girl was here to stay. And it was a great, fun show. So
good. That's
I would absolutely recommend it. If anyone is like, should I go to the Addison Rae concert? It's very fun. I will say it's a unique show because the focus is definitely like the dancing and the lighting and the vibe of it, to be honest. There were no live musicians on stage with her. She fully danced and sang along to tracks. So,
okay.
Yeah, a little bit of like a non-traditional concert feel.
Yeah.
But it was still very fun. So
cool.
Love Addison Rae.
I've seen some TikTok clips and it seems a little risque.
Yeah, I was also going to say that I'm not going to post the videos on my Instagram stories. That feels a little, it is a little risque. I will also say too that I'm very short and I was in the back of the general admissions session. I am mainly there for the vibes because I cannot see when I go to concerts very well. So afterwards, when I was looking at the videos on TikTok, I was like, oh, whoa, there was a lot going on the stage. I could not see. I had no idea what was happening.
That's funny.
So that did add an element to it. And afterwards, I was like, oh, that's funny. Had no clue. But I do think that girl is a superstar. But yes, it is quite risque. So don't take your parents. Don't take your children by all means. Like
it's like when people took children to the Sabrina Carpenter concert and then they were like all shocked about it. She literally sings about sex all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Like they tell on themselves. They let you know. It was actually, there was a funny moment at the show where she said, and any parents who brought their kids, like she's sorry, but like also listen to the Addison Rae music. You can maybe know anything about her and how she's been promoting her music and maybe assume that's not for children. That's okay.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Enough about Addison Rae, a showgirl in her own way, of course. And
definitely.
So had to shout her out. But anything else that we want to touch on, talk about before we dive into just the history here?
I don't think so. It's been a quiet week. Selena Gomez got married, which was very cute.
Yeah, the pictures so far have been
adorable.
Beautiful.
Other than that, like there hasn't really been a lot going on.
I know, pretty slow pop culture week. I don't know if you really listened to Tate McRae's new song. That was like a response to her ex's song. That's like the only drama I'm seeing right now.
Okay.
Kid Laroi and her were dating, I guess. I'm starting to get a little bit too old for some of these pop culture references because I'm like, I don't really know who Kid Laroi is, but they were dating. He released a song about her, I guess, a couple weeks ago. So then she released one. And one of the lines is let's go song for song, let's go tit for tat. Like, we're beefing now. Is that the best you have? Like, where's the good one at? Pretty brutal, pretty fun.
Yeah.
Love some pop culture song duels. Always.
Man, I haven't even heard about that. What is going on with my TikTok?
Look it up. I know. Honestly, I think my TikTok For You page needed some cleansing, and it needed some just like early 20 pop star drama.
Yeah.
And so I listened to her song. I listened to his song. He came out with a music video.
Okay.
A little bit of drama about that. And her song's good.
Love that. Fun.
Do you want to introduce the topic and dive into some of this showgirl history for us?
Okay, so a showgirl. I think that was a thing that everyone immediately has an image of in their brain.
Totally.
Yes, even though they're not necessarily around very much anymore, which we'll get into. But a showgirl is a female performer in a theatrical revue who wears an exotic and revealing costume, and in some shows even appeared topless, and are usually dancers performing as chorus girls, burlesque, or fan dancers, and many were even classically trained ballerinas. The French actually viewed the term showgirl as an American idiomatic expression because some strip clubs and some strippers even use the term showgirl as a part of their business name. And showgirl used to be just a name for a young woman who acted in a showy way to attract male attention. And it wasn't until the mid-19th century that the term came to mean a singer and a dancer in music hall acts.
Interesting.
So, yeah. So it just came about as a term, and then now is
very much associated with that like glitzy old Las Vegas glamour. Like immediately we know the outfit.
Yes. Yeah. Which is so interesting that technically it started in Paris, but the term showgirl is uniquely American. Before a showgirl, when we're talking about like early theater, pre-17th century, women weren't even allowed on stage. So in Shakespeare's England, for example, all female roles were played by boys or young men until 1660, when the Restoration brought the first actresses onto the English stage. And then in the 18th and 19th century opera and ballet, women found more space as prima donnas and ballerinas, but these were often considered immoral or fallen women who participated in this.
Oh, interesting.
Because ballet in particular had a reputation for backstage liaisons with wealthy male patrons. And if you think of even Bridgerton, the actress, the opera singer in that, and the reputation that it was very common for the time. So ballerinas, prima donnas were considered immoral. So there was a stigma with women on the stage. So it wasn't really until the 19th century, with women appearing in comic sketches, novelty acts, and dance numbers, that they started becoming recognized for their talent, and the stigma stopped being such a part of it. The showgirls, or the revolution of women taking the spotlight on stage and not necessarily having a lot of those same stigmas attached to them off the stage, even though obviously some of that followed because of the nature of the performances, especially with a lot of the more risque ones. But yeah, so interesting to think about that is showgirls is like the revolution of women being center stage.
True. And like over time, like owning that fully.
Yeah, and having like multiple of them. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, Paris Cabaret and the Folie Bergère in the late 19th century is when the showgirl first started being shaped as a notion. Cabarets like Montmartre or the Moulin Rouge, chorus dancers would perform the high-kicking can-can, which is still a very popular dance that everyone knows, that drew crowds for their daring style and costumes. At the Folies Bergère, the director Edward Marchand took this further in 1886 by centering whole revues around lines of chorus girls in glittering, revealing costumes, making them the main attraction rather than background performers. You even have dancers like Louis Fuller, who we've done an episode on, who debuted at the Folies Bergère, and with her flowing silk costumes and colored lights that kind of pushed the spectacle of dancing and femininity and more of a performance even further. By the 1890s, the Folies Bergère was famous for its elaborate productions where synchronized female ensembles and dazzling stage effects created the foundation of the showgirl tradition. So all birthed in Paris, which makes perfect
Feels
sense.
fitting. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And then how does it enter the United States? We've got the Ziegfeld Follies in New York that famously brought the showgirl phenomenon to Broadway in 1907. And Florence Ziegfeld Jr. drew inspiration, of course, from Paris because that's where it was happening, to build a uniquely American spectacle combining song, comedy, and dazzling visual tableau. The chorus girls, soon dubbed the Ziegfeld Girls, became central attractions, parading in elaborate and often extravagant costumes by many designers that became known for their insane costuming. Yeah, as showgirls. There's actually a podcast I listened to. It's called, I think I've mentioned it before. It's called Dressed, the history of, and they have a 2-part episode on the fashion of showgirls. And kind of dive into a lot of the designers and like different things. They talk about different pieces of costume or different showgirls and like what they were famous for, and then different designers and what they designed and how it entered the world of showgirls. So if you're looking specifically for fashion, definitely go listen to that, because we will not be talking about the fashion of showgirls.
No, but they'll be the experts on that.
Yeah. But it was very fascinating and crazy that some of these people were able to build a career just off of costuming like showgirls. The Ziegfeld Follies marketed the Ziegfeld Girls as the most beautiful women in the world, encouraging audiences to watch which performers might break out and become stars. And over time, many of them did. These Ziegfeld Girls would go on to have successful solo careers in theater and film, and this would cement the showgirl model as a part of Americans' entertainment glamour mythos. And the showgirl became that costume and aura of exoticism that surrounded her rather than just like a performer of her own. So until they would break out in their own solo career, it was interesting they would fit in this like stereotypical role and embody that. But they weren't just dancers. It was very much so considered a walking spectacle with feathers, gowns that shimmered, jeweled headdresses, and kind of these like ensembles that made them larger than life. Like you think of the dresses and the sparkles and the sequins and the huge feathered headdresses and the heels, and suddenly they're just this something that just goes beyond the regular performance. The costumes also, very interestingly, would draw on a lot of ideas from like different cultures or like mythic fantasies. There's a lot of like cultural appropriation going on.
Definitely.
Which, is expected at that time period. Doesn't mean it's okay, just means that it happened a lot. But this would allow them to take their audience to faraway lands and like different places throughout their performance. And that created a large appeal for the audience of them getting to go and see things that they normally wouldn't get to go and see. And then the golden era of showgirls is considered the Las Vegas era. Of course.
Makes sense. Yes.
It's synonymous with showgirl. I think you think of showgirl, you think of Vegas.
Totally.
But that didn't come about until about the 1940s to 1960s. Vegas boomed during the post-war era, and showgirls became the emblem of entertainment and excess of the whole city. By the 1950s and 60s, every major casino on the Strip fielded its own chorus line with extravagant costumes, more of those feathered headdresses, rhinestones, sequins, becoming a part of a visual battle to outshine the competition. In 1959, the Folies Bergère opened at the Tropicana, imported from Paris, and built around the topless, statuesque showgirls with lush sets and vaudeville-style acts, running for nearly 50 years and becoming one of Vegas's longest-running revues. Wow. That is a long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then later, Jubilee launched in 1981 under producer Don Arden with costumes by Bob Mackie and Pete Menefee, which continued the showgirl tradition with dazzling spectacle, becoming an iconic fixture on the Strip until it closed in 2016. So which is very recently.
Yeah, super recent.
Mm-hmm. And in these productions, the showgirl would evolve from a background ensemble to a star attraction, her costume, pose, and presence turning her into a living advertisement for the fantasy and glamour that Las Vegas promised. And it became central to Las Vegas's identity. That was a part of what Las Vegas was. It was the showgirl. She embodied glitz, fantasy, and spectacle in a way that no other performer could and became a walking advertisement. Casinos would compete fiercely for tourists, so they would use lavish showgirl reviews to differentiate themselves. Costumes became even more spectacular with larger headdresses, more exotic staging, anything that a casino could do to take them away from the rest of the competition and make their showgirls seem more to die for than any other, they would do. The Fuller's Bergère at the Tropicana, for example, exploited topless, statuesque showgirls in elaborate costumes, not to just entertain, but to attract eyes. That's definitely going to get an audience in Vegas.
Yeah,
More so
absolutely. Yeah.
than you might imagine. And then also, these showgirls were a promotional role, appearing in advertising, escorting VIPs, and becoming ambassadors of different brands and resorts that they embodied or worked at. And this just became part of what people imagined and expected when they visited Las Vegas. They were going to see a showgirl, and there would be many of them, all competing for your attention. However, the life of a showgirl was very grueling and much harder than the glitter suggested. There was weeks of training, really heavy costumes, relentless schedules. New recruits often underwent intense rehearsals before debuting, learning choreography, timing, and even how to move with these towering headdresses that would weigh as much as body armor. I can't even imagine trying to balance that
that's
on your head.
crazy.
As one former Jubilee dancer recalled, you had to hold your posture perfectly or the weight of the feathers would throw you off balance. Many came from ballet or jazz backgrounds because, as another showgirl put it, it wasn't just walking pretty, it was athletic. You had to be an athlete to survive. Performances themselves were punishing. Dancers might appear in 12 to 13 shows a week with constant costume changes, often 6 to 8 per night. Betty Bunch, a former Fuller's Bergère dancer, remembered, we would finish one number, run backstage, rip off one costume, throw on another, and be back under the lights in minutes. The repetition, long hours, and constant strain of dancing in heels left their mark. One showgirl admitted, my feet were always swollen, but the show didn't stop for sore toes. On top of this, of course, they had appearance rules because everything seems to have appearance rules when we're talking about women.
The fantasy. Gross.
It is gross. Like, man, I don't think there's been a single like stage performance or like anything that we've talked about where there hasn't been appearance rules for women. But they had to maintain specific weights. They couldn't have tan lines. They had to have re-auditions even after being hired. Anna Bailey broke barriers as one of the first Black showgirls in Las Vegas and noted the pressure bluntly. If you didn't fit the look they wanted, you were out, no matter how good a dancer you were. And that's another thing to note, that racial diversity not very apparent.
No.
Very bad. They had an idea that there needed to be uniformity in a lot of the can-can kicking lines, and so that led to a lot of racial discrimination very early on. When they finally did broaden it and start to show more, it was very rarely just more and more racial discrimination. The figure of a showgirl also became a huge Hollywood trope, especially in the 1920s through the 1940s. Early musicals with Warner Brothers and MGM made backstage musicals that would center on chorus girls and showgirls. Busby Berkeley's extravaganzas like Gold Diggers of 1933 and 42nd Street turned synchronized showgirl routines into a cinematic spectacle with elaborate kaleidoscope choreography shot from above. These films helped establish the glamorous chorus line as a Hollywood staple. And then you would also have films like Ziegfeld Girl, starring Judy Garland, Lana Turner, and Hedy Lamarr, dramatizing the rise and the struggles of women who became the Ziegfeld Girls, tying the showgirl myth directly to stardom, beauty, and tragedy. And then MGM also produced The Great Ziegfeld, which won the Academy Award for Best Picture, and its sequel, Ziegfeld Follies, which was a revue-style musical featuring stars like Fred Astaire and Lucille Ball. And these films presented the showgirl as both glamorous ornament and a symbol of the Broadway Las Vegas fantasy. So in Hollywood's golden age, the showgirl wasn't just a background. She was a modern image of entertainment who linked Broadway spectacle with the glamour of the movies, using her sequins and reinforcing the whole idea of a showgirl.
Totally. I am going to shout out some specific showgirls here that are more famous. Some of these we've already talked about, so we do have some episodes on some of them. This first one, this is a French name. So it's Mistinguett, which is Jean-Marie Bourgeois, better known by her stage name, Mistinguett, 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 something like that. But she was born outside Paris in 1875, and she became one of France's most famous sensations in the early 20th century with the comedic and musical routines that just the audience loved at the Moulin Rouge, Folie Bourgeois, and Casino de Paris. Mistinguett's legs got tons of attention. The press often mentioned that she had insured them for an exorbitant amount of money. That sum varied from source to source, but in 1936, she herself said that they were insured for $500,000 each, which is about $23 million in today's money. And
man,
I do have to shout out the Taylor Swift connection because Taylor Swift's legs are insured. And once she made a post about, because the cat scratched her leg, and she was like, thanks a lot. Now, like, my cat owes me $1 million because it got out that her legs were like insured or whatever. So
that's funny.
I loved reading that because I was like, wow, no way. A Taylor Swift connection.
Showgirl.
She's truly a showgirl. Had the legs insured. Also, $23 million for your legs. That's some great legs.
That's a lot of money. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Man.
There was a mention that like musical theater fans might be a little bit more familiar with her work because there's a song, My Man, that was popularized by the American comedian Fanny Brice, which we've talked about because of the funny girl of it all, by Barbra Streisand playing Brie in 1968's Funny Girl. Which is the English version of her song, Mon Homme, My Man.
Oh, cool.
Little shout out there. Next group of showgirls is the Dolly sisters, which were identical twins, which was Janzica and Rosika Dutch. They were born in Budapest, Hungary in 1892, and they immigrated to New York City with their family, and they performed together as Jenny and Rosie Dolly, aka the Dolly sisters. And I think they're like the best known sister act in the early 20th century. They appeared and started in vaudeville and appeared in a number of Broadway productions throughout the 1910s and 20s, including the 1911 Ziegfeld Follies. And I guess European audiences loved them. The sisters would sometimes perform a part, but Jenny, with her first husband, who was a vaudevillian, Harry Fox, but they're mostly remembered as their act together. They actually inspired a movie that came out in 1945 called The Dolly Sisters that was starring Betty Grable as Jenny and June Haver as Rosie, but it doesn't tell the whole story, of course. Their careers pettered out by the late 1920s. It's really tragic. Jenny was injured in a horrible accident in 1933, and she died by suicide in 1941. And then Rosie died of a heart attack at age 77. But yeah, those two sisters are like the famous Dolly sisters, the two showgirl sisters. This is one that we've done a whole episode on. So if you want to learn more, if this little paragraph intrigues you, there is so much more to the story.
Which it should
intrigue you. Yes. Yeah. Because this is Josephine Baker, who was born in Missouri in 1906 and brought the jazz age to France in a big way. Her most iconic number was a dance performed in a string of pearls and a skirt made of bananas. Her life off stage was just as crazy because during World War II, she used her star power to spy for the Allies by smuggling intel written in invisible ink on sheet music. She even would pin notes to her undergarments. Showgirl to World War II spy.
Yes.
Later, she would adopt 12 children, whom she called her Rainbow Tribe. She was also super active in the American Civil Rights Movement, participating in the 1963 March on Washington, and she had a pet cheetah named Chiquita. And that is just the footnote of her life. So go listen to that story about Josephine Baker. She's an icon.
She's fascinating and probably, honestly, one of the most well-known showgirls.
Totally. Ever. I think so. Loli Falana was born in New Jersey in 1942, and as a teenager in the 50s, she booked her first gig as a dancer for a jazz singer named Dinah Washington. Her big break, though, came in 1964 when she did a supporting role in the Broadway musical Golden Boy, and then became famous in Italy for her TV appearances and film roles. But the biggest part of her career happened in the 1970s and 80s, where she was known as the Queen of Las Vegas for her dazzling shows at top hotels. She was actually one of the city's highest paid performers of the era, and during her peak, she earned $3 million for performing at the Aladdin for 20 weeks of the year. So, a pretty big deal performer. She was actually later diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in the late 1980s, withdrew from entertainment, and then ended up focusing on Christian missionary work. So,
interesting.
Total 180 there. But for a while, she was the highest paid performer in Las Vegas.
Wow.
This last one that I'm going to shout out is Dolores, who was the British fashion designer, and Titanic survivor Lucille, aka Lady Duff Gordon, plucked Kathleen Marie Rose from obscurity as an errand girl in London and turned her into the famous model named Dolores. So, Lady Duff Gordon, Titanic survivor, which is just a crazy thing to say, found this woman. When Paris's fashion industry found her during World War I, Lucille took Dolores and some of the other models to New York to hopefully get some business there. Florence Ziegfeld attended one fashion show and asked Lucille to use some of her designs and some of her models for his reviews. Quote, "It is going to be the biggest draw I have staged in years." And according to Lucille's 1932 memoir, "That girl Dolores is marvelous. She will be the sensation of New York." And this was correct. She was a 6-foot-tall blonde goddess that captivated audiences and would influence runway culture for decades to come. The legendary fashion editor Diana Vreeland remembered Dolores as the greatest of Ziegfeld's showgirls. Quote, "She was very highly paid just to walk across the stage, and the whole place would go to pieces." Vreeland said in her 1980 book Allure, "It was a good walk, I can tell you. It had such fluidity and grace. Everything I know about walking comes from watching Ziegfeld's girls." Dolores, about her time just being a showgirl, said, "I recognize perfectly that the showgirl end of the stage has no future to it. We haven't histrionic ability, and we don't delude ourselves about any visionary career. I'm here because I have looks, and I won't have enough looks after 30 to be here." Her plan was to marry well and live the scene before she got phased out. In 1923, she wed American millionaire William Tudor Wilkinson in Paris and retired there.
Worked for her, I guess.
So it worked. She said, "I'm only hot for this amount of time. Let me find a man that can take care of me afterwards." She did.
Man.
And you know what? Good for her. But she was Ziegfeld's biggest girl there. So shout out to Dolores there. And that's something I was like, I've never heard of her. Which I haven't either. I'm like, so many potential future episodes just from this list of 6 women. I love it. To keep talking about what happened here with Showgirls, like why aren't they so much of a thing? I do want to know, I watched today Pamela Anderson's The Last Showgirl movie, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but with the closing of Jubilee, that was like the longest running Showgirl show in Vegas that used to close in 2016. The closing of that is what inspired this movie, where this woman had been a part of this show since the 80s, was a part of it for decades, and like how that falling out of that affected her. But with Las Vegas being the entertainment capital of the world, like it's constantly changing. It's honestly impressive that some of these shows were even going for as long as they were. Like 50 years is a long time for a show to run anywhere and anything. So it's crazy that the original Showgirl production survived as long as it did. But newer audiences were seeking different spectacles, such as like Cirque du Soleil's and things like that, instead of like the lavish productions of Showgirls. I feel like it almost became kitsch. At a certain point, it wasn't legitimately glamorous. It was like tacky to do like the Showgirl thing, which I think's sad because it is sad. Beautiful and glamorous, of course, but I think it almost became too iconic that it became, I don't know, like not something that was like fascinating or intriguing.
No, I would agree. I also think it's funny to think about that now because kitsch is very much so coming back in a lot of the things that were like considered very tacky or like reinventing and reviving themselves.
It's almost funny that Taylor Swift is the one bringing it, something kind of kitsch back.
Definitely.
Especially when I feel like she's jokingly teased for being like millennial cringe or something like that. But she's bringing it back. She's making it sexy again. But it wasn't until the 1990s that these classic stage shows winded down. And there were a lot of reasons for this. Like the city had become super corporatized. And so the hotels no longer supported these extremely costly shows. The productions had also become outdated and antiquated. And to be honest, I guess the draw of topless dancers was just no longer attractive to audiences. The Showgirl productions closed one by one. Casino de Paris was discontinued in 1981, Lido de Paris in 1991, and Folie Bergère in 2009, with Jubilee ran for 34 years, was the last Showgirl production standing, and it lowered its stage lights and shuttered in 2016 and marked the end of the era of the Showgirls. There was a Las Vegas showgirl named Carrie Byers that was deeply impacted by the closures. Quote, "It was horribly sad to see Jubilee close. It affected so many people. Hundreds of people lost their jobs, dancers, wardrobe, stagehands, singers, etc. My husband was actually a spotlight director, so it did affect me personally. There's a former showgirl and dancer named Luann Chesick, who was the original Jubilee cast member, says that at the end of the final production, the Las Vegas showgirl ceased to exist. There was no longer a place for tall, topless women in elaborate costumes on Las Vegas' stages. The city's entertainment industry moved on, leaving the showgirl behind. Quote, I think the showgirl's world just kept shrinking, and people really didn't appreciate her iconic status until the shows that gave birth to her were gone. People who now come to Las Vegas seeking a real showgirl are left with those women who amble down the street strip in go boogs and bikinis with a few feathers glued to their barely made headpieces." So it's almost interesting that there is like a purism about it from these women who, I don't know, who took it very seriously. Like I mentioned, I watched this movie called The Last Showgirl, which was a movie that was directed by Gia Coppola and written by Kate Gersten. It stars Pamela Anderson, also Jamie Lee Curtis, Billy Lord, Dave Bautista, and Brenda Song were in it. But it focuses on a middle-aged woman who is a Las Vegas showgirl who is faced with this uncertain future after learning that her review that she has performed in for 3 decades is scheduled to close. The screenplay was adapted by Gersten from her own play that was called Body of Work, which she based on her visits to the Jubilee show shortly before its closure in 2016. So it was a really sad movie of just like this woman who put her whole life into being a showgirl, and now that it's over, she's realized she doesn't have anything else, and it's pretty devastating. But it was an interesting thing to look at because her as a character, like she'd been doing it since the 80s, and so all the promo pictures she was on from the 1980s, and she was like talking about how it made her feel so beautiful to be out there and to be performing, and also would talk about the fact that, oh, but like it's French, it's this, like it is something to be taken seriously, and realizing that's not how people viewed it. Like people viewed it as like the cheap, like it's not very good dancing, it's not anything necessarily to be proud of. I'm not saying that because I think that. I'm just saying that's like almost was the perception of it was like a lower art form, and like her own realization of that. It was pretty devastating. Something cool that I wanted to mention is that when these showgirls and their rooms started begin to disappear, there were a lot of people who like made the effort to document. In 1982, a Las Vegas showgirl, Terry Ritter, set up an easel in the corner of a backstage shower at the Tropicana. Between acts of Folie Bergère, she began applying paint to canvas. Why use the shower as a studio? It had the best light. Another who acted was Reno showgirl Karen Burns, who collected 1,200 pieces of everything, from black top hats to rhinestone armbands, in an effort to preserve these memories. And then in June 2007, the last showgirl art competition exhibition opened at the Nevada State Historical Society in Reno, and the exhibit displayed like colorful snapshots of showgirls from Las Vegas and around Nevada. The Showgirl Union and the art competition came from a 15-year Stardust in Reno veteran showgirl Luann H. Chesick, who began to worry about what kind of legacy showgirls would leave when the Stardust was demolished in 2007. Quote, "You can implode hotels and sell off the contents, but art won't vanish. Art is forever." So it's interesting, and it's so cool how these women were really taking what they were doing so seriously, which you had to. If you're performing in those elaborate costumes, like that's a difficult thing that they were doing. And I just think it's really cool that there were a group of women who were like, okay, this is leaving. Let's make sure that we preserve this because we take this seriously. And this was something that we think should be respected. So I thought that was really interesting.
I think that does play a lot into the cultural perceptions and stereotypes of a showgirl for a second here. Because showgirls were marketed as both high class and risque, it led to these ideas of an ideal woman being statuesque, exotic, and untouchable. Mm. The myth of a showgirl in pop culture and everything became this like paradoxical place between dazzling fantasy and frustrating reality. So you have the showgirl on stage. She's sold as a glamorous ideal, tall, statuesque, somewhat exotic, her body framed as art, visually elevated yet untouched by the audience. These advertisements and posters are promising sophistication and seduction in equal measure, making her both high class and risque at the same time. Yet
Interesting.
critics and scholars pointed out that the marketing glass masked a harsher truth. The showgirl's body was strictly policed. She was often reduced to a visual commodity. The movie Showgirls in 1995 attempted to dramatize kind of the idea of the facade of glamour giving way to power imbalances, exploitation, and commodification. And the film's own marketing leaned hard into this tension with like posters and taglines saying leave your inhibitions at the door, provocative promos showing erotic spectacle, even reviews lambasting exploitation of female bodies. So building into this dichotomy of what are they? Is it cheap entertainment that's built off of exploiting women, or is it this high class, very talented art? For time, though, popular culture has kept the myth of the showgirl alive in pinup art, in Las Vegas branding, and television parodies, and in the camp reclamation of Showgirls as a cult classic, where the line between celebration and critique remains unsettled. There's even been a lot of artists that have tapped into this and used the showgirl as a part of their act. Azalea had a music video that references the 1995 movie Showgirls overtly, with Azalea taking on the Nami role and performing in a neon lit review surrounded by other showgirls. Scenes have her in a sheer rhinestone bodysuit, feathered headdresses, and part of a staged chorus line. Madonna was famous for evoking a lot of showgirl aesthetics in her tours and visuals. During her girly show era, she incorporated cabaret, high heels, sequins, and theatrical staging reminiscent of the classic showgirl review style. And Taylor Swift, of course, now taking it on and adding in that showgirl aesthetic. And will she be able to truly capitalize off of the life of a showgirl itself? And even though the showgirl is this figure, this thing that doesn't really exist, it still has become this cultural symbol, something that exists in advertising, media, fantasy, art, and now in real life.
I'm interested to like what drew Taylor Swift to this visual and like where the resonating was. I think like how you talked about how showgirls are like this idealized image of being the perfect woman and like needing to put that on and like feeling the pressures of that. I wonder if that's where it came from, or even just like being a cultural icon herself. And I'm not just like even saying that because I'm a fan, but just because like it's a fact like of what she's like become in more recent years, and especially like at the height of her career being the Eras Tour. I just find that interesting of where those connections are, and I'm excited to see how the album maybe explores those possible connections too.
Yeah, I think a lot of inspiration that I can see coming is from like her Tortured Poets Department set that she did during the Eras Tour, and like kind of feeling like a puppet on a string perform, like, and we'll all keep clapping for you. I can imagine her kind of reaching out into history and kind of wondering where these like icons of like performance and everything, where they were, and drawing from inspiration from that.
Totally. And like another interesting thing too, where you talked about like Showgirls was like one of the first time women fully took center stage. So it's like this like dichotomy of like, awesome, women are, you know, the main event and they're stepping into that. But then also, is it exploitive? Is it empowering? Is it, I don't know the answer to that. And I'm sure that's just very case by case.
Definitely. I think that's what makes the showgirl such an interesting figure in a lot of ways, is that it's like kind of this blend of so many different things that in a way it does represent femininity in so many ways too, where it's sexual and artistic, and, but like also very elegant, and
it can be all of it.
It can be all of it at the same time, and that's what I think the showgirl represents.
Totally. The full myth of the showgirl. Las Vegas. I've seen people doing the theories of like maybe she'll do some type of Vegas residency in the spirit of Life of the Showgirl. Usually people don't do Vegas residencies until later in their career, but if then there's anyone who could make that cool and chic, I think maybe it could be Taylor Swift, as
I'd
she's
be cool with
potentially
that.
entering a new stage of her own life. Could be
Yeah.
interesting.
I mean, it would make it easier to get tickets if she's staying in one place for a while, I think.
Exactly.
And
Especially being
Vegas.
somewhere close to home.
Yes. I'm like,
For
Vegas
you,
was my
not for
Eras
me.
tour. That's how close it is.
Mm,
Definitely the closest venue we've got. I wouldn't
totally.
mind that at all.
I'm sure. I'm super excited to see what happens with this album. I'm so excited to hear the sounds, excited to see what references we got with all of our Showgirl study this month. And yeah, I'm just excited. I can't wait.
I
I
am
love the
too.
first time that I get to listen to a new Taylor album.
Same. I still remember all of the most recent ones, and it's a wonderful experience.
It
So,
really
very, very
is.
excited about that.
Yep.
And of course, we won't leave all of you hanging with our reactions. Instead of jumping right into our Halloween content, next week's episode is going to be our album recap, just talking about the movie that we're going to go and see, the album
We
itself.
have to talk about it, and we
Yeah,
know you want to talk about it.
yeah, I'm sure we'll be able to fill plenty of time talking about it as well. So we figured rather than just make it the opening of another episode, we'll talk about it for a full episode. And then we're diving right into our October content, which we're always huge fans of. It's our
the most excited of.
Definitely come back and check all of that out for that whole month. And we'll see you then.
We'll see you next time. Enjoy the life with the Showgirl.
Oh,
cool.
Quick reminder. Go buy our merch.
And go buy our merch.
We're both wearing it. Go buy the merch. Okay.
Yep.
Bye.
Okay, bye.